Now you two missed. You let me just recap, just a little bit, not much. Believe me, not much, but recap what we were talking about yesterday. We're talking about cross-examination, of course, and I told you yesterday that there's a way you can determine just how good or how bad your cross-examination is going, or it was when it's all over with. And how do you do that? You sort of reflect back on it. And if your cross-examination, if it involved a conversation between you and the witness, okay, what I call dialogue cross-examination, where I speak a little bit, now you speak. You're my new, of course, perjuring Pete. And then the witness speaks a little bit, and then I speak again, and now the witness speaks. That's what I call dialogue cross-examination. And if that's the form your cross-examination is going to take, you're doing a miserable job. With the tools available to you, the cross-examiner's tools available to you, you're doing a horrible, horrible job. Because cross-examination has to be a monologue. But today we're going to learn how to make it a monologue. It's easy to say, make it a monologue. How the hell do you do that? How do we make it a monologue? Well, that's what we're going to do today, okay? By the way, 3 things. People have asked me if there were 3 things I had to do. And there's a magic in 3. I'm not going to repeat that, but there's a magic in 3. But 3 things that you really want to strive to do to improve your cross-examination. Indeed, if you were to do these 3 things, your cross-examination will be 90% better than it is right now. Here's what they are. Number 1, and we're going to talk about this momentarily, I want you to look good. That's our goal. That doesn't seem too hard, does it? We're going to talk about that in a moment. I want you to look good, okay? Number 2, and we talked a little bit about this yesterday, I want you to tell a story. Actually, it'll be a series of stories, all united in a way, but you're going to tell a story on cross-examination. And number 3, and this is what we're going to spend quite a bit of today doing, you're going to tell that story through short statements. Short statements, okay? So there you go. You want to be a better cross-examiner? Look good. Huh? Tell a story and do it with short statements. Now, where we were yesterday, I told you I had 3 preliminary things I wanted to talk about, and finally, your patience will be rewarded. We'll go into the actual system of cross, and I will do quite a few crosses with you to demonstrate what we're talking about. 3 preliminary matters. The first one ties into something I just said. Look good. Look good. The goal of cross-examination, when you get up to cross-examine, and you want to win your case, that's what it's all about. Be it a civil case, a criminal case, whatever the dickens it is, you want to win that case. Well, how do you win the case? Believe it or not, it's fundamental. The jury likes you. And we're talking about juries, by the way. The jury likes you. If the jury likes you, they give you that great gift of credibility, and you've got a good chance of winning the case. And conversely, if the jury doesn't like you, forget it. As we said yesterday, the hunt's over, okay? So we want them to like you. And I mentioned yesterday that when I started practicing law, back an awful long time ago, with no benefit of the wonderful teachings that you people have, the philosophy from my people, from criminal defense lawyers, was simple. It was attack, pillage, and plunder. Leave no prisoners. We got up there and with a vengeance we went after people. Well, that doesn't serve you well because the jury doesn't like you. I want the most important thing when you get up to cross-examine, I simplify this for you and tell you, I want the jury to like you. Because then by the way, in my business certainly, not necessarily in what you people will do for your livelihoods, but in my business, The juries seldom like my clients. They're all from central casting. Most of them, their knuckles drag on the ground when they walk into the courtroom. They're all mouth breathers, like that. And it's hard for the jury to get some empathy for these people, but at least get them to like you. Now, by the way, should I be accorded some great distinction for coming up with this? Look, no, hardly. A guy thought of it before I did, and his name was Aristotle. And he thought of it, 300 years before the birth of Christ. Aristotle said, if you're selling something, the first thing you gotta sell is yourself. You gotta make people like you. And that's what our goal is going to be, to make people like you. I could give you some incredible examples. People, I haven't gone into this in a while, but I will, just a little bit. When you're cross-examining, you're going to think this is a terrible thing, by the way, for me to say, but I'm going to say it to you. Form is more important than substance. Now, you stop, and you'll disagree with me when I say that now, but stop and reflect on it. But form is more important than substance. How you appear is the important thing, not the substance of what's happening, okay? I had a great example for this that I used to use, but unfortunately time has all but interred my example. And I doubt that it would work. I'll see if it will, I'll do it, but probably I won't. Did any of you read a very, very fine book, by the way, the book, or more probably see the movie Presumed Innocent by Scott Turow? Nobody in here. Okay. Did you?
Read part of it.
Yeah, read part of the book. Okay. Absent, my example won't work. But there's in that book, Scott's a marvelous author. I think he's the best of the current authors of that kind of stuff. Scott was an assistant U.S. attorney in our district. We had cases with him. But anyways, great author. But in that book, there's a scene. It's in my materials. You can read it. And this is the point I was going to make. I can't make because you haven't read it. But I asked people, okay, the case turned on it. It was not unlike a Perry Mason case. It turned on the cross-examination. But this time the cross-examination of the doctor who had posted the body, okay? And I asked people who've seen the movie, what was the decisive part of that, the major thing in that cross-examination? What decided it? And they all give me the answer. And guess what? They're wrong. They're all wrong. And then I actually go back to the actual cross-examination. But what happened was everybody, the substance was lost on everybody. The form was what decided the case. So we're going to want to look good. That's going to be our quest. I won't go into any of these offshoots anymore because I think I divert you from your purpose when I do. Next thing, second thing, housekeeping rules. We have a lovely young lady from Los Angeles here, and this is a Los Angeles housekeeping rule, okay? When you go up, I don't have a writing instrument. If you'll let me use your writing instrument, young lady, thank you. That was not the Los Angeles lady that gave that to me, by the way, just for the record. But when you go up to do a cross-examination, a direct examination, or, good gosh, an opening statement, a closing argument, whatever the heck it is, do not go up there armed with a writing instrument like this. And then where do we see it? In direct examination all the time, right? Direct. Now, and what did you see? They cross something off, okay? And what did you see after that? This kind of stuff. Do not go up with one of these in your hand. Why? It's a distraction to communication. We talked about this yesterday. We're all about being communicators. That's what the big thing is, being a communicator. And if I'm going to be a communicator and I've got this in my hand, I'm not communicating very well, gang. It's an impediment to communication. And by the way, you guys, you watch the sports commentators now, on the thing, and what are these idiots? Of course, they're all former football, baseball, basketball players, whatever. And what do when they're up there? They're up there with their pens and pencils going like this, We don't do that. We don't use, here you go, young lady, we don't use, I have pens or pencils in our hand. Well, people say to me, well, Terry, that's fine and dandy for you to say that, but the witness may say something important, something I want to write down. Okay, you want to write it down? Be my guest. Write it down. But not for yourself on a yellow pad or something of that nature. If you want to write something down, you know where you want to write it down as a trial lawyer? No. How about a blackboard? How many of you use blackboards when you try your cases? Just little blackboards. Well, you want to use blackboards. Blackboards are magic. Huh? Oh, I know. You're all sophisticated. You say, well, Terry, we've got this PowerPoint stuff, and boom, we push buttons. And by the way, I am not a believer in PowerPoint. That's another story, and I won't go into that with you. That deals with communications. But what you write it on is a blackboard. There's a lawyer. I know you've never heard of him because he doesn't blow his own horn very much, but there's a lawyer out in, Wyoming or California, depending, by name of Jerry Spence. And I'm sure many of you have all heard of Jerry, okay? Jerry cannot speak without a blackboard. But in the same breath, he is a genius with a blackboard. I have never seen anybody use a blackboard as effectively as Jerry Spence does, okay? He uses it beautifully. And by the way, the magic of a blackboard, when you were an impressionable first, second grader, okay, your teachers didn't use PowerPoint. What did they use to teach you? They used the blackboard. And the all-knowing teacher wrote on that blackboard. And that was from the burning bush. That was the Word of God. And you still smell that chalk, in your nostrils. And they wrote it. And there's a magic to blackboards. So if a witness says something you really like, go write it on the blackboard. I've had lawyers practice for 20 years say, you mean during cross or direct for that matter, I can write on the blackboard? Move over just a little bit so I can see you. Yeah. You can write on the blackboard. By the way, there's only one requirement to being able to write on the blackboard. And that's that the witness must say it. You cannot just go up to the blackboard and write, you're a lying SOB on the blackboard, during cross-examination. You can't do that. But then again, as we're going to get into our system, if you use the system that I'm going to share with you, you can get witnesses to say anything you want. So when they say the things you want, go up and write them on the blackboard. No more pens or pencils. Use the blackboard. Now, we don't have in here, maybe we do, it might be behind me, I don't know, a lectern. You all know what a lectern is. By the way, most of you call it by the wrong name. You call it a podium. It's not a podium. Did you ever look up the word podium? Podiums are things buildings are built upon. And you cannot build a building on lecterns, okay? But anyway, lecterns are put in courtrooms. Why? I'm not sure. I suspect that whoever looked at the first courtroom said, hey, put that little piece of furniture in there. So we have them in our courtrooms, okay? And I'm also going to tell you, and remember now, this was going to be an awful lot about communication. I told you that at the get-go, right? And to the extent it's about communication, lecterns are impediments to communication, just as that pencil in your hand would be, so also a lectern. Why? Because something we talked about yesterday. When I have a lectern in front of me, what's it doing? It's hiding a great, well, in my case, it's a positive, but not for the rest of you, but it's hiding a substantial part of my body, you see, right? I have this thing right there. It's hiding my body, and that's taking away from body language. Remember the important thing of body language. You got that thing. And by the way, you should see the lecterns we have in northern Illinois, the federal court in northern. They are huge. They are big. They're high and they're wide. They're about this wide and they're really high. And the marshals over there, they're a great group of people, but they've got a terrible sense of humor. And they always tell me in more recent years, they say, Terry, those lecterns were built in anticipation of your growth. And so they're wider and all that. But anyway, I happen to stand 6'3", and I get behind them, and I'm like about here, right? Well, some of you are a little shorter than I am. Do you know what you look like behind a lectern? The top of your head is showing, your hair. No, don't get behind. The only time I would allow a trial lawyer, to go behind a lectern is on direct examination. And even then, I don't think you want to do it, but I'll allow it. But you certainly aren't going to do it on cross-examination. Do not stand behind a lectern. And that leaves us with the third. You knew there'd be three, of course. The third housekeeping rule, notes. Am I allowed notes when I'm crossed? Yeah, you can have notes, and I've taught with some marvelous trial advocacy teachers over the years who abhor the thought of a trial lawyer using notes. Well, that's not right, because you need, oftentimes, you need to write down important names, dates, a phrase you want to make sure you're going to turn during this, whatever it is you're doing, okay? And you have to write those things down. And so you can write them down in your notes. But what's the evil? You know what the evil in notes is now. We talked about it yesterday. We didn't talk about it in the context of notes, but we certainly talked about it yesterday. What's the most important thing in communicating? Eye contact. Looking at the people to whom you're talking is critical. So how the hell do I get eye contact if I'm down here reading notes? I was watching some of your local TV personalities last night. A couple of them very good. A couple of them were horrible. They never looked at and I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, this is terrible. So that's the error in notes. So what do? You want to read? You want to write something down because your memory's not infallible. You're going to forget something. Write it down. But when the moment comes where you have to refresh yourself with it, go down. Get it. Now come up and now deliver it to somebody's eyes, okay? That's what you're going to do. So and by the way, you don't believe me on the notes? My golly, you're in the right place to see this. On Sunday, there's no NFL football now going on, and there's no basketball because that'll be Monday night, will be the finals of the NCAA, my favorite sporting event of the year, by the way, the semifinals and finals of NCAA. But the Sunday, you won't have anything better to do. So what are you going to do? Watch the preachers, particularly your Southern Baptist preachers. Watch them. They're good communicators, by and large. They're really good communicators. Well, do they have? Yeah, Terry, they've got lecterns. Yeah, they've got lecterns. But I suspect strongly that somewhere along the line they heard my talk about 7 or 8 years ago. Why? What are their lecterns made out of now? Pure glass. Pure glass, so that you can see through. Is that perfect? No, it's still not perfect, but it's a great improvement. They're not behind a lectern covering the body language. So they've got the glass there, right? And incidentally, they had those lecterns made of glass, and they do get behind them occasionally. And they'll do some stuff behind them. They'll read to you from the Bible behind those lecterns. They'll put the Bible on it, and they'll read to you strongly from the Bible. But when it comes to something really important, they get up around the side of the lectern. For instance, when they're asking you for money, they get up around the side. They're not going to stand behind the lectern. So we're not going to stand behind a lectern. We're not going to do the LA one with the pencil in our hand. You can, not now is all right. And this and notes, we know we can have them, but we're not going to read from notes. Now there's one, to every rule there's going to be exceptions, and there is an exception that we don't read from notes, but we're not going to get to that, I don't think. Maybe next week we'll get to it when we get to impeachment. There's one time when we're doing a certain kind, well, impeachment on truthfulness, when we actually want to read from the notes, but that's in anticipation, okay? So those are the three things. Now, one last preliminary matter, very important one, and finally, then some of your patience will be rewarded, finally. We're going to talk about the system of cross and how you actually do my system, my style of cross-examination. Last thing, if you were to, I'm sure in your excellent trial advocacy training you get here, that the trial ad people, and if you were to go to some of the good NETA programs, and there are many good trial ad programs bouncing about, okay? And if you were to go to them, they would stress to you the importance of primacy and recency. And by the way, where do you suppose they came from? The rhetorical forms of speech, the same place that our trilogy came from, okay? We never really went into those, but we don't have time to do that right now. But they came from the rhetorical forms of speech, primacy and recency, and it's important. You always start on a high note. Start with something impactful, important. End on a high note, something impactful. And remind me to make a comment apropos a little discussion we had a little earlier. But you want to start on a high note, end on a high note. They teach it in all the trial ad programs, right? But interestingly, they teach it in the context of the opening statement, in the context of the closing argument. Why in the dickens don't they teach it in the context of cross-examination? Or, if you want, direct examination. It belongs in cross and in direct as well. McElhenney, who was a great teacher of trial advocacy, by the way, McElhenney has brought it into direct examination, and I think he's about this close to bringing it into cross now, okay? Well, I'm certainly going to bring it into cross, and from now on, so will you. You will be different than most people when you do it this way, but you will be a much better cross-examiner because of it. Primacy, primacy, primacy. Start your cross-examination on a high note. What is this going to get rid of? It's going to get rid of all that BS at the beginning, those soapy salutations people like to use at the beginning. When I was a young lawyer, I was a young lawyer once. When I was a young lawyer, I was taught by the master criminal defense lawyers in our area, Terry, when you cross-examine, you slather them, and this was the term, slather them up and slather them down when you start the cross. Well, I did it. It was stupid. It was stupid. Oh, good morning, Miss Jones. We're so happy to have you here in the courtroom this morning. And we're supposed to get a little rain today, but it's very nice out there. It's great to be down here where the sun always shines. Now, if you don't understand anything and everything I say, you just let me know. You understand this? Sure, okay. And this won't take long. That's the worst expression I could ever. This won't take. Would you like, by the way, a little coffee and donuts before we get started? Oh, Jesus, come on. That's slathering them up and slathering them down. And that went out with starched underwear. There's a study by a small little institute of higher learning in North Carolina by the name of Dookie or something like that. I forget exactly their name. Oh, I do know they have a great basketball team. And do you know why their basketball team is so good? Their coach. Do you know where their coach is from? Chicago. Yes, Kay is from Chicago. Played in the Catholic League in Chicago. But anyway, there was a study done at Duke years ago. Do not get it. Do not read it. Okay? And why don't you read it? Because it wasn't done by the law school at Duke, okay, which is a good law school. It was done by the School of Anthropology. Have you ever known anthropologists in your life? Anybody? Oh, try and have a conversation with an anthropologist. Oh, my good God. Well, they did the study. Why they did it, I don't know. The concept was a good one. The concept was, what do jurors like in lawyers? What do they like in witnesses? What do they dislike in lawyers? What do they dislike in witnesses? That was what they were studying. Great thing. You think that might be of great value to us? Of course it would be. But unfortunately, the anthropologist wrote the results, okay? And so it doesn't read very real well. It reads like the federal sentencing guidelines, you know. But anyway, there are in that report some beautiful things, and I will distill them for you. I will give you a couple of them, and one of them is right now. They say when you get up to cross-examine, the jurors expect you to be a professional right from the get-go. And I couldn't agree with anything more. We're going to get rid of all that. Oh, good morning, Miss Jones. By the way, MacCarthy, rule, cross-examination. You ready for it? We're going to have one exception. Hopefully we'll get to that exception right at the end of today if everything works right. But you do not call witnesses by name when you cross-examine them, nor do you give them titles like doctor, captain, you know, whatever, okay? Well, if we don't call them by name, Terry, what do we call them? Don't call them anything, darn it. We don't have to call him anything, so we're not going to call him anything. There will be one notable exception. We'll save that for a while, okay? And the reason, you don't just emphatically tell somebody something without giving them a reason. I will. When you call somebody by name or give them a honorific, a title, okay, you're building them up. You're giving them some control. And we do not want to give control to witnesses, so that's the reason we're going to not call them by name, okay? So we're not going to call them by name. We're not going to go into the weather, the coffee and the donuts and all the rest of this crap. We are going to do it differently. We're going to start the cross-examination with primacy. We're going to start with something impactful. Where do we get our primacy? By the way, there's another good one. Where do we get, what's that? That's a rhetorical question. Where do you suppose we got that? Thank you, Greeks. We got it from you. Also part of the rhetorical forms of speech. The rhetorical question. These are great things, but that's for another subject, another time. Maybe next February we'll just do a day on rhetorical forms of speech, and that would be fun. And then we'll find out they really didn't come from Greece. Oh, by God. But that's another story. They came from, you won't believe where. Anybody know where they came from? I did some research on this recently. I was shocked. They came from Sicily. Yeah, believe it or not. But that's another story. That's the whet your appetites for the future, okay? Now, we want primacy. We want to start on a high note, okay? Well, where do we get our start? We go back and we look at the themes from the case. We talked about this yesterday. The themes from the case, the things that are going to make our storyline. And we grab obviously a good theme, and we use that good theme to start our case. One that I've used for years, and I apologize that most of my illustrations will involve criminal law, because that's what I've been doing for much of my professional existence, okay? But anyway, criminal law. I've got a mugging case, okay? Elderly woman. I always pick people that match. Remember I told you yesterday, people that match I need an old woman, so I picked her out here. I gained friends this way, of course. And the older woman leaves the Chug-a-Lug bar at midnight, walking home. She's got a 3-block walk to get home, and she goes under what we call in Chicago a viaduct. Anybody not know what a viaduct is? Be honest, you don't. That's interesting. That's what I've been saying. People say, "Oh no, everybody knows what a viaduct is." No. It's a Middle West expression. A viaduct is an overpass. Now, in years past, when I was a kid, the only things that ever went on that overpass were railroad trains, okay? Well, now there could be highways, anyway, a viaduct is an overpass, okay? And you go under the viaduct, right? And there's lights put in under those viaducts, but the little kids with their slingshots go up and boom, they love shooting those lights out. So it's dark under viaducts. And the older lady left the Chug-a-Lug bar at midnight, and she has to walk 3 blocks to get home. She goes under a viaduct, and lo and behold, under a viaduct, we'll use this illustration a little bit more, I think we will, but under the viaduct, tragically and unfortunately, she gets mugged. Some clown runs up alongside of her, pushes her, grabs her purse, and runs away with her purse, okay? That's fairly simple. This is an antitrust case or something like that, okay? Now, that older woman is on the stand, and I am going to cross-examine her. Well, what have I got theme-wise? Well, just in the facts I've given you, you can see a few themes that are potential themes in this case. One of them, obviously, is going to be the lighting. It was dark under there. This is an eyewitness identification case. And by the way, the faultiest case that a prosecutor can ever bring is an eyewitness case. Believe me when I say that. It's subject to tremendous abuse. But anyway, it's an eyewitness case. It was dark out under there. But she's going to describe, and she's going to say that, hey, by the way, there he is. That's the mugger. I never forget the face, okay? So it's an eyewitness case. So I may want to start with the darkness, okay? Or, well, look at her. She was obviously belting him down in the Chug-a-Lug bar. She was probably half drunk when she's at. Another good theme? Yes, it's another good theme. Maybe the guy she's going to pinpoint was African American. And that raises but another issue, doesn't it? You see? And by the way, what's always an issue in every eyewitness case? Her description of the mugger. It will never match, okay? If it matches, you know that the description didn't come from her. It came from the police after the arrest, okay? But it never matches. So let's just, to illustrate, to demonstrate to you, let's do it. The dark night, it was dark out that night. So how are we going to start the cross-examination? How are we going to honor Aristotle and do primacy? Well, simply like this. There's my witness. Ready? Now watch what I do, and then we'll break it down and explain it. We can agree it was dark out that night. Yes. Okay? Now, did you see it? Remember it looked good? I didn't come on. It was dark out there, Did you see I was nice and we can agree it was dark out. Now let's break that down. When you start a cross-examination, every time you start, I told you we get into the meat and the coconut now, right? Every time you start a cross, you start with, well, there's 3 phrases in my outline, but I really only like 2 of them, okay? You always start with one of these 2 phrases. We can agree, or fair to say, okay? I like those 2 phrases. We can agree, fair to say, is the start of your cross-examination, okay? And you're going to put forward something that she's got to literally answer yes to, okay? Now, but let's develop it. I did something else in there. Did anybody notice what else I did? Oh, you did. Oh, you're bright. Both of them. I got all kinds of bright people. You want to be a trial lawyer, a successful trial lawyer, you must learn to use your head. You You're going to make us think? No, I'm not going to make you think. All I want you to do is learn to move your head up and down. By the way, is this just for trial? No, it's for everything you do the rest of your life. Going to go into a restaurant tonight. You want a good table? I'll tell you how to get your good table, and it works every time. You go up to the maitre d', and there he is. You have a good table for me, and nod your head. Why do we do it this way? And she did, by the way. When you nod your head and tell somebody something, guess what they do? They nod their head too. It's human nature. And once somebody starts nodding their head, they've got to say yes. Don't ever nod your head like this and try and say the other term. You will snap your neck, okay? I've lost judges, witnesses, they tried to, pull them out, another opening on the federal bench. Okay, good. But anyway, you want somebody to say yes. Oh, there are stories that are legend around the country on this with trial lawyers around the country in places I've gone where they've challenged me with this to get better rooms in hotels or get a better table. And it always works. It always works. People have been amazed. You want something, just look at somebody, tell them, and nod your head. By the way, is this important here? Somewhat important, but not critically. It really comes in to be important when you're trying that trial of yours and there's an objection. And we'll get to that in a moment when we get into it. But when you want the judge to rule for you, as Your Honor well knows, get that head going like this, and you put the right ruling in the judge's head when you do that. We'll talk about that, and I'll show you specifically how to do that momentarily. But there you go. There's our primacy. We can agree it was dark out that night. And there was, yes, I looked good. I didn't come on like, Bela Lugosi would in one of his old movies, or somebody, you probably don't even know who the hell Bela Lugosi was, but that's all right. But anyway, we can agree it was dark out that night. There you go. Now, that's thematic primacy, based upon a theme in our case. It was dark out that night, right? Well, Terry, are there other sources? Yeah, there's some great sources. We're going to get into these. I'm hoping next week we get into it because it's my current area of love and interest. We're going to get into the area of impeachment. Impeachment, weapons of mass destruction. Only we're going to find those weapons of mass destruction. Well, what about looking at the ways we can impeach a witness? How would this sound for primacy? A criminal case. There he is. Now we're switching over here. I've got to have the guy with the Lombrosian characteristics I want, okay? And there he is. This is the best primacy I could ever imagine. I can never think of anything better. And we get it in criminal cases quite often, okay? How about this for primacy? He's got finished perjuring himself on direct, and now I go up to cross-examine him. Just think of this. Fair to say, you're a convicted felon. Can you think of anything ever better than that? Now notice, by the way, those who were with me yesterday, notice what we did now. They don't know what we did, but you know what we did. Fair to say, you're a convicted felon. I'm giving those lines to who? The jurors, not the dippo here, not the my convicted felon. Fair to say or we can agree you're a convicted felon. Now, what's his answer to that going to be? This is the most beautiful primacy in the world. Now, by the way, those of you who aspire to go into a career in criminal law, that's not how you impeach under 609, but we'll talk, that's a good start, but you're going to go a lot longer than that, but we'll talk about that. Hopefully, we'll get time to talk about that next week and how you impeach with 609, but our purpose is now, we can agree you're a convicted felon. By the way, also, this is important to you as trial lawyers. Labels. When you're trying a case, you're telling a story. And to tell a story, it would behoove you to have labels. People don't remember. You read a book, in the 6th page of the book, it talks about the 4 Jones brothers. And it was Peter, he was the tall one, and there was, and you read this at page 6 of the book, right? Now you're on page 94 of the book. And you say, and it says, now Peter Jones came into the room. And you say, oh, Jesus, the Jones brothers. Well, which one was Peter? You don't remember who Peter was. And that's true generally. You got to go back, and you go back and find page 6 to find, oh, Peter was the tall one and stuff. I mean, let's face it, this happens to all of us frequently, right? In movies, well, movies just see things, so it is no different. But I do it. Well, when you're telling stories, you've got to adjust to this. They won't remember. So when you tell stories, give people labels rather than names. The tall police officer, the short police officer, or the heavy police officer, whatever the heck it is, the sergeant or the patrolman or whatever. We give them labels. And some of the times, those labels serve us particularly well, don't they? Does he now have a label for the rest of this trial? Yes. And what's his label? The convicted felon. He will never have a name for the rest of the trial. In closing argument, when I refer to him, it'll be, ladies, gentlemen of the jury, you'll remember what the convicted felon told us. The convicted felon told us blah, 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 and blah. And every time you use that term, convicted felon, you gain a few points on the meter that helps you win, okay? So that's his label. That was a little diversion there to talk about labeling. And we're going to label everybody. But now you got the primacy. Now you say to me, well, Terry, I'm going to practice civil law, and I won't get too many convicted felons as witnesses. So is there something, there's something else you can use, by the way. Well, just go down the food chain on impeachment. Are you ready for a few more down the food chain on impeachment? Here we go. Watch this now. Fair to say you're a liar. Do you like that one? Do you like that one? Yeah, I just had, I shouldn't say this because it's being taped, but a dear, dear, dear friend of mine out of law school, believe it or not, there's a few of them still alive. But this guy does a lot of trial work. He's a fine trial lawyer, a good guy. And we were just having dinner the other night, and he's telling me about this case. And the fella, he's not his opponent, the lawyer, but his opponent, the I don't know, defense, or let's see, he was the plaintiff, so the defendant in the case, okay? He lied. He lied twice to get continuances of this case. And they knew they had him on these lies, right? Claimed he was in a hospital, one time. He wasn't in any hospital, right? So I said to my buddy, I said, well, then how'd you handle that in cross? He said, oh, I told the jury that this guy wasn't always, completely candid. I said, you did it in the middle of your cross? Yeah. He said, well, you've not always been totally candid. I said, that's bullshit. He said, what do you mean bullshit? He said, that was a good way to do it. I didn't want to. I said, you know how I would have started that cross with him? No. Fair to say, you're a liar. And that's how I would have started. That's a hell of a lot more impactful. And that's what you want to do. And if you don't have liar, maybe you go down the food chain, We can agree you work for the XYZ Corporation there. Whatever the hell it is. Go down the impeachment food chain. So it might be thematic, or it might come from one of the methods of impeachment. But start on a high note. Start on a high note. No more, good morning, Mr. Jones. I hope you had a good trip to the courthouse and all that crap. That went out with starched underwear, okay? For you. For the two of you. I wasn't going to talk about this, but now I am. The second part of this is recency. End on a high note. But Terry, I'm going to be a public defender, and the only thing I've got going is it was dark out. She was sober as a judge. It wasn't cross-racial, and she got the description right. The only thing I've got is it was dark out. Okay, fine. The end of the cross-examination, it was dark under that viaduct. Yes, and sit down. Okay, that's all you had. You use it. But normally you want to end on a very good note. Also, you start on a good note, you end on a good note. Now, herein lies a problem. Two of the lovely young people in here, when they're not playing roles, have told me that they were introduced to Irv Younger. And I spoke very highly of Irv yesterday, but then in this next breath I said he really wasn't a trial lawyer, okay? But Irv Younger had 10 commandments. Or did they expose you to the 10 commandments today? Okay. Well, then, my God, it's just an hour or so away. We should get an answer. I never get an answer to this, but maybe today we will. Irv had one of his 10 commandments sounded a little bit like my recency. My recency says end on a high note, okay? Now, what did Irv teach you about how you finish up cross-examination? What was his commandment? What should you not do? Oh, she's going to look now. Okay, I'll help you. You don't remember. Nobody ever remembers this, which bothers the bejesus out of me, by the way. People that have heard that talk millions of times don't remember. But I'm going to tell you what it was, okay? And Irv, one of his commandments was, don't ask the one question too many. Do you remember that now? Don't ask the one. And when lawyers from around the country heard that, they said, oh my God, that's incredible stuff. We've got it now. I'm going to avoid, as a cross-examiner, asking the one question too many. And then I'll be a great cross-examiner. There was a problem with that, however, and the problem with it is simply stated. The problem was he never told you when you were getting to the one question too many. So what are you going to do? You know, lawyers in East Jesus, Kansas were going back to try a big civil case. And they said, oh my God, I want to avoid the one question too many. Well, how am I going to do that? Well, I've got a 2-hour cross-examination of this witness. I know what I'll do. I'll cut that 2-hour cross-examination down to 1 hour. And that way I'll avoid the one question too many. And by the way, did they improve the cross-examination? Yes, they improved the cross. Why did they improve it? Because 1 hour of horseshit is not as bad as 2 hours of horseshit. Excuse my French, okay? But so they improved the cross. But they never knew when they were getting to the one question too many. Now, I don't know if, I doubt you went this far. Did you hear his, well, by the way, his poignant illustration of the one question too many? Did you hear that? You were. Well, you will be eventually exposed to that. And when you are exposed to it, you will look at it in a slightly different light than others. Because when most people are exposed to it, they're very impressed with this, okay? Well, none of you would know the answer. I usually like to ask people, but you wouldn't know the answer, so I'm going to share the answers with you, okay? The case that he uses to illustrate the do not ask the one question too many is a criminal case. All interesting cases are criminal cases. But it was a criminal case. It was tried in my beloved state of Illinois by the lovely Lakes and Waters, Illinois, okay? The criminal defense lawyer in the case was somebody you've all heard of. Oh no, you're going to say Clarence Darrow. No, this was much before Clarence. The criminal defense lawyer was none other than Abraham Lincoln. He was a good lawyer, you know. And by the way, I just did a mental thing on his name. The professor loved Abraham Lincoln. He knew more about him than anybody I knew. And he really knew about Abe. And Abe was a good trial lawyer. A good trial lawyer in his day. What he did back then would not be passable today. You could never get away with it. As to be a good trial lawyer, you couldn't get away with it today. That's how much trial ads changed. Why? Because of NIDA, all these trial programs, because of Stetson Law School and what you guys do here, okay? It's changed immensely. But anyway, Lincoln is trying a criminal case in Illinois, and the case was a nose bite-off case. Now you hesitate and you say, well, a nose bite-off case, what a weird case, Terry. But what you don't know is that in every particular area, every state in the country, there's a certain crime that's endemic to that state. And Illinois, it's nose bite-offs, okay? We get more nose bite-off cases in Illinois than the rest of the country put together, okay? You walk down Michigan Avenue on a beautiful summer day, and you walk down and you see all these wonderful people, but all these mangled noses, victim of a nose bite-off. We get a lot of nose bite-off cases in Illinois. I don't know why. Nobody knows. Something in the water, whatever. But by the way, you Floridians shouldn't be laughing at this, right? Why? Because I know what the #1 case in Florida would be, criminal case. At least I know what it would be if sheep could testify. I know what it would be, but we won't talk about that, okay? We'll let that one go. That was terrible. That was terrible. But then again, how terrible was it? I saw you guys out there, your faculty men, or one of your faculty being amorous with a pig. So, what the hell? Where am I supposed to go with that? But anyway.
What's the #1 in California?
I don't know. I can tell you, but I don't know. Anyway, so it was a nose bite-off case. And to make his point, Irv Younger, to make his point, tells us about this trial. And I'm going to change just a little bit in how I do the cross, because Lincoln, at his time, was, I'm sure, a great cross-examiner. He wasn't by our standards today. We'll talk about that later. We talk a little bit about the history of cross-examination. But here it was. And there he is back there. Lincoln was cross-examining the prosecution witness. And he's cross-examined. The guy was a bird watcher. A bird watcher, yes, indeed. And I got to find somebody who looks like he might be a bird watcher. And I've got him right back there, a bird watcher, okay? And he's cross-examining the bird watcher. And he said, well, you were looking into the woods. Yeah, you were looking. This isn't the way Lincoln did it, but I'm going to do it in my style because it's a little bit better until I get to the important part, and then we'll retrogress back to Lincoln. You were looking in the woods, yeah. You weren't watching those two guys over there. No, you were watching for something else. Yes, you were watching for birds. And so your concentration was there. Your eyes were there. Yeah, fine. Lincoln's doing a good job because we've changed it around for a little bit. What? And then he says, well, as a matter of fact, you didn't see Johnny bite the nose off? No, I didn't. And now Irv Younger jumps in and he says, now, Lincoln has got it. He should sit down. But Lincoln, even though Lincoln was brilliant and a wonderful man, great trial lawyer, he is going to screw up. He's going to ask the one question too many. And sure enough, what's Lincoln's next question? Well, if you didn't see him bite it off, how do you know he bit it off? Can anybody imagine what the answer might be to that? Nobody can imagine? Oh, not good imaginations. I saw him spit it out. You talk about poignant things. This is what made Irv a great CLE speaker. The poignancy of his examples was incredible. I saw him spit it out, okay? And that you'll never forget it once you hear it now, right? So he said, I saw him spit it out. Okay, that was pretty good. And now Irv Younger says, you see, he screwed up. He asked the one question too many. Now, Irv, no. You